Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our event tonight. It's really lovely to see so many of you here with us. My name is Claire, and I work for Sabeel-Kairos UK. We are a campaigning charity. We campaign for Palestinian human rights, and we work in partnership with Palestinian Christians, and we work mainly with Christians in the UK. Advocating for Palestinians, telling their stories here in the UK. So tonight we've got, I'm so excited for the event we've got tonight. In September, I was privileged to take an amazing group of guys out to Palestine with the Sabeel Influencer Project. And tonight, I just feel really honoured to have a number of that group here to share some aspects of their experience whilst they were on the trip. So I've given them time each to talk about different aspects of the trip that we had. Um, Please keep yourselves on mute during the presentations. If you do have any questions, please just save them to the end, and we will have time for questions and answers at the end. I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And also, I'm hoping that you're able to see the slide I've shared, which is for our Christmas appeal. We opened our appeal a couple of days ago, and amazingly, people have been so generous, and we have managed to raise enough money for the special activity day that we're planning for children in the village of Zabadi. Not sure if I've said that right. We're now looking to reach the target of £18,000 because we would love to support families who are needy in the West Bank. Unemployment is now so high because of the closures of the roads outside of some of the villages and towns in the West Bank. So we're looking to raise money to support families in need. I will put the link to our appeal in the chat after I've introduced our first person. So please, if you'd like to donate, we'd be so grateful. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first person. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would like to welcome Alex, who is going to begin our presentation this evening by sharing with us about the educational bookshop in Jerusalem. Alex, go for it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Claire. Oh, hang on. There we go. Am I muted? Okay, now I'm on. Thank you very much, Claire. And I'm going to share a slide if I can get that back up here. It's working just a minute ago.
You can do it, Alex.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, well, forget the slide. I'm just going to talk. So the educational bookshop was well, first of all, thanks very much to Claire and to Omar and to everybody at Sabeel for having us over. It was a really wonderful, unique opportunity to learn and to participate in not just the brutal parts of Palestinian history and current affairs, but also some of the cultural events too, which were really a joy to see. The educational bookshop was one of the first places we went when we arrived. It was one of our first visits. And it really should be a first visit. I recommend for anybody going to Palestine, to East Jerusalem and the West Bank for the first time. It was started in the 80s and created really as a response to a lot of the misinformation. It was meant to be a place for journalists to go and learn about Palestinian current affairs, about human rights. And it was meant to be a counter to all of the terrible propaganda that we usually just see parroted word for word from the Israeli regime. So fun fact, it was originally supposed to be called the Palestine Education Company, but when it was founded, Israel had banned the use of the word Palestine in trademarks, so it was instead called the Educational Bookshop. Over the years, the shop became a cultural hub. It was a space for lectures and talks and all kinds of political and historical learning. I think only just last week, Peter Beinart was giving a talk at the shop. So getting a lot of different points of view, and I'm sure people had a lot of lively discussions around his ideas. Um, you might have seen in the news that in February of this year, Israeli undercover police raided the shop and arrested its owners, Ahmed and Mahmoud Muna. They claimed the shop was selling books that incited terrorism. But the absurd thing is, none of the seven officers could read or understand Arabic or English. And yet they were going through the shop and saying this book and this book are inciting terrorism. So they tried to use Google Translate on the covers and grab anything that had a Palestinian flag or a map of Palestine or the word occupation on it. They got angry when the Google Translate in English didn't work on the German language books. There's one shelf in German. Um, and they seized a graphic novel of 1984. And one officer asked why they had a book about 1948, the year that Israel was founded. They also grabbed a Haaretz newspaper and said that the H in the logo stood for Hamas. So they were really sort of grasping at straws to try to um, prove that there was incitement to terrorism in this shop. Um, they took about 300 books. They took a children's coloring book. They took travel guides, books on political theory, cookbooks, everything. The owners, Mahmoud and Ahmed, spent 2 nights in a freezing cell near the Jaffa Gate. When they were released, they were placed under house arrest. They were banned from visiting their shop. They were also banned from discussing books, period. The lawyers didn't try to find out what that meant exactly because the more you inquire, generally, the more severe the punishment becomes. A judge later admonished the police for fabricating the charge of incitement to terrorism because there was obviously no evidence. They changed the charge to disturbing public order, which is a sort of catch-all for anything the state doesn't like. The case is still ongoing, received widespread international attention from publishers and writers on social media. You'd think that Israel would have learned from that experience that raiding bookshops only makes them more notorious and more popular in social media. But while we were in Jerusalem, another shop was raided in September. The police raided the Gateway Cafe, and arrested the owner, Tony. I happened to take a photo of the bookshelf before it was completely cleared by the owners. The owners wanted to make sure that they weren't in the same situation that the educational bookshop had been in, so they took that precaution. But the police did seize a few books and took them away as evidence again of incitement to terrorism. And they're all really, the books that we've all seen and read, many of us, Rashid Khalidi's 100 Years of War in Palestine, books by Ilan Pappé and the like. And so just to conclude this episode, when a state fears cookbooks, the problem isn't really security, it's the existence of Palestinian identity. When they're raiding bookshops, when they're taking children's coloring books and saying that that's evidence of incitement to terrorism, and when journalists are being targeted, as we've seen in Gaza, when poets are being killed, as we've seen in Gaza, it really shows how fragile the racist fascist state really is and how stupid their policies and tactics are because trying to stifle speech only makes speech louder. We've seen just this week, we've seen Hillary Clinton claiming that everybody on the other side who cares about the genocide, that they're all uneducated somehow. But the ignorance is Israel's only last line of defense. Israel depends on people being ignorant to maintain the apartheid state and to commit crimes like genocide. So I like to think that every time people read books about Palestine and share their thoughts on social media and give book recommendations, that they're doing their part to really undermine and eventually collapse this structure of fascism and apartheid. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. That's great. Sorry we couldn't see your slides, but thank
Sorry.
you so much for sharing about the bookshop. I'd like to invite Aya next. Aya's going to be talking to us about the Lifter village. Thank you, Aya.
Hi. Yes, I'm going to be talking about Lifter. I'm going to try and share my screen. Have I done that? Right. Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Look at that. Tech Pro. Okay.
Yay.
Um, most boring holding page for my thing. Okay. So I'm gonna
Tell us who you are, Aya.
yes, okay. So my name is Aya Haidar. I am an artist. I'm a textile artist. Um, Lebanese textile artist. I'll just include in that last little bit. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Lifter. I had a very visceral reaction to my time in Lifter, which I'm going to speak about as diplomatically as I possibly can. I can't make any promises, so just bear with me on my language. So this is, I just thought I'd start by locating Lifter for you. It's not very far from Jerusalem. It is a depopulated village since 1948. Um, when we first arrived in Lifta, we to literally to the top to our left was Deir Yassin. Deir Yassin was made famous in 1948 when the Israelis went in and massacred 170 Palestinians. It's known, the Deir Yassin massacre, it's known, it's very famous. So that was at the top of the hill. And then at the bottom was Lifta. And Lifta is this beautiful, stunning village that was also depopulated, ethnically cleansed in 1948, and remains under Israeli occupation. Um, Now, here is a picture of utter filth. I'm not referring to the murky water. I am referring to the settlers in this picture. This is the first sight that we were met with as we entered Lifta. These are all Israeli settlers bathing their bodies in this water, in this ayin, in this water source. All of them, pretty much all of them, were armed with AK-47s and Glock guns that they put very nicely to the side before they went and had a little swim. Somehow the general narrative, the lamestream media is trying to sell me the idea that these white pasty gingers are natives to this land. But in fact, sorry, I was looking at Shy, but in fact, it is physically impossible. It's unreal. This glorious human, however, is native to this village. This is Mu'tasim. We were shown around Lifta by Dalal and Mu'tasim, two Palestinians who are from Lifta, whose family are from Lifta. Move this thing. Can I move this? No, I can't move this. Okay. They're from Lifta. And Mu'tasim is pointing to his grandmother's house. This is his grandmother's house, and with the blue windows. And he spoke about this house in such a beautiful way because the way in which he spoke about it was very much through his grandmother's eyes. He wasn't born when she lived there, but this like longing of where she belonged to and this home that she grew up in, that she got expelled from and kicked out of it very violently. And the massacre that she experienced at this time was a story very typical of Arabs, of specifically like my generations. We're told of our histories through our grandmothers and our mothers in such a very honest, raw way that we feel it in exactly the same way. And every time, and when he spoke to me in Arabic, and I understood his rootedness, I understood where he came from, I understood his story just from his tone and the attachment that he has to this house that he never lived in. Um, so yes, so there was so his grandmother experienced and lived the expulsion and the massacre. Um, this is Mu'tasim. I wanted to touch on, we speak a lot about ethnic cleansing and the cost of lives of people, but I just wanted to touch on um, not just the colonization of people, but the colonization of the land and flora, which is really, really important. And this is actually informing current work of mine, massive tapestries that I'm making on the colonization of the flora. So lifta comes from the word lifit in Arabic, which means turnip. This is a place where there's an abundance in nature, there's an abundance of fruit and trees and nature is glorious in Lifta. And what the Israelis have done and continue to do is that they uproot the indigenous flora, the cactus, the fig trees, the olive groves, the za'atar, all these amazing indigenous plants that are rooted in the soil. They pull them out and they replace them with Northern European pine trees that unfortunately catch fire because they're not adapted to the climate, and they erode the soil, and it's a completely different level of pH, and it totally messes up with the ecosystem in this region. And so as I watched Matasim pick the figs out of certain trees, you can see in his DNA, this is something inbuilt in him. Whereas the settlers that were sat there, the disregard, the pure disregard that they had, the litter, the way in which they sat in that pool of water that otherwise would have been clear, is I felt really sickened by it, like physically repulsed by it all. I wanted to show an image of what a traditional Palestinian home looks like and would have looked like. These beautiful arches. Ultimately, these homes that they built their whole villages purely out of stone and some mud to kind of connect them. But the angles in which these stones are laid form the right pressure or the right. I'm not really good at physics. I dropped it at GCSE, but you know what I mean, like the right angles to kind of hold themselves. There were no building materials whatsoever that were introduced. They were only introduced in 1917 when the British arrived, but up until that time, it was only the stones and the mud. And these incredible structures. These are traditional homes, and what we spoke about in this time, Dalal was talking about this concept of al-una. Al-una is a concept across the Levant, across Palestine and Lebanon, where communities work together. They work together to build each other's homes. So I would build my home with the help of Shai and Alex and Emma, and then in turn I would help them build theirs, and we would then help Diogo build his. So everybody helps everyone out, not just in building our homes, but in cultivating our land and taking care of our children. There was a real connection, a fiber, a community that was built. And this caring of the land and its people. People knew their neighbors, people understood each other, they knew who everyone was. And through Dalal and Mu'tasim's stories, it revived for me this essence, the essence, the soul of Lifta. I really had a visceral reaction to Lifta because of the way they spoke about this place that ultimately is a carcass now, but they filled it with a soul. This is an image of one of the insides of the houses, and it's been left derelict and completely uprooted. But what Martasim was explaining to me was, at the front, you can see this like structure at the front. This would have been where they would have refrigerated certain foods. In the middle is where they would have had the press to have, they had their own olive oil presses in their homes. They had means of refrigerating food. It was incredible. It was really developed in ways that, we kind of think those kind of communities are really backwards and whatever, but actually it was incredibly progressive. And then you walk around and you're met with this, and behind us is what I feel is like a very visually disruptive, very visually aggressive image. In the back, you can see these multi-story new settlements. So they've uprooted these incredible structures, incredible homes with these monstrosities in the back, and then everywhere you go, whatever left space there is barbed wire that's just littered everywhere. It's incredibly aggressive, it's dangerous, it's unnatural. What I had a real reaction to was the fact that, around the time of the Nakba, like this is not too long after the Holocaust, where barbed wire was used everywhere around, when they were holding the Jews, and now they reintroduce the same aggressive material in the place where they are colonizing and occupying. There's something really fucked up about this mentality that they can use the same material to aggressively hold a place where they once were held. Do you understand? So this for me gave me a real discomfort. Again, here, one thing that they used to do is in and around the houses is they would they would drill holes in the ceilings of these Palestinian homes to make them structurally unsound and collapse. So they wouldn't waste their time with just bombing they're not going to take time and money to do that. They would just bore holes in the ceilings to make them structurally unsound, dangerous, and make them collapse. And not because they wanted to keep them for themselves, but they wanted nobody to live with them. Israelis didn't live in these homes. They just wanted to make them structurally unsound so that Palestinians didn't live in them and nobody lived in them. Sorry, let me move to the next one. This is an image, as we walked around, this is an image of a mosque, one of the mosques where the Israelis who had moved there thought this would be a perfect place to have a party, leave some alcohol, and just the litter, the physical I suppose the remnants or like the physical trace that they've left is really abrasive. It's violent visually for me. This is a place of worship. This is a holy place, and what they have done is actually choose this as a party place where they drink and God knows what else they do. The disrespect, the disregard for the environment, but also the people who lived here before it was very, very prominent. And then they would graffiti. And here, this little golden nugget by Golda Meir, a former Israeli prime minister in 1973, said, "We can forgive you for killing our sons, but we will never forgive you for making us kill yours." This quote never ever sat right with me because it continues to, I find it very, it infuriates me because despite the visual aggression and the visual disregard to their environment and the people and the colonization, they still hold this victim card. They still have to be the ones that have been forced to do this. That this war was forced onto them, this occupation. Ultimately, Lifta made me feel incredibly connected to the land of Palestine in a way that no other place did on our trip to Palestine. I went on a very personal journey with Dalal and Mu'tasim while we were walking through this. I envisaged it and I felt it, but also I don't think I felt as unsettled and as angered as I did there because we were walking around these settlers who were there with complete disregard to this amazing place that I envisaged in my head. Yeah, I left very, very torn and yeah, quite emotional about it. But anyway, that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Aya. That was lovely, and thank you for sharing your heart. We really appreciate that. Please, can I invite Shai to come and speak to us next on Al-Aqsa Mosque?
Hello, everyone. I'll let Tez share the PowerPoint, hopefully.
Can you introduce yourself for us, Shai?
Sorry. Yeah, my name's Shai. I work as a business analyst. So I work in local government, and Tez is my husband. I'm not his wife, so he'll be coming on later on. And we have a podcast which is award-winning. So that's just my introduction. I'm going to talk about Mosque Al-Aqsa. Before I start on this segment, I just wanted to say, having Aya with us on this journey was incredibly powerful because she's Lebanese and I never really truly understood the impact, I guess, on Lebanese, the population in Lebanon, even though I've been to Lebanon, but I saw a physical reaction to her when we went to the mosque. So we went to the mosque on the second day when we landed in Palestine. And when we went through Jordan, there was a moment where I thought my husband wasn't going to make it, not literally, but I thought he was going to make it through the border. And I was adamant that if he didn't come through, I was through, that I was going to turn back. And he messaged me and he says, Shai, whatever you do, just go to the mosque and then come back. That's all you have to do. Just go to the mosque. And Alhamdulillah, he made it through. But we went to the mosque, and for many of you that know, the mosque is not, it's not just a mosque. It's a very sacred site for us, especially in Islam. It's absolutely beautiful. And it was my first time. I have seen the mosque and, pictures of it, paintings of it throughout so many years of my life. But when they say to you, you walk up to the mosque and you see it, and your breath will leave your body. And I remember having this surreal moment, aside from the fact that there were soldiers there with huge guns looking really aggressive. This is what we're showing you right now. This is what the mosque is surrounded by. They're not surrounded by what we would perceive if you were to go to a normal mosque, and you might see imams, you might see people coming out of prayers. They've got guns, they've got like masks, they're standing there quite aggressively, and you're like interrogated to go into a mosque, and it just blew my mind. But when we were going, I got to a point where I got a bit scared. I got a bit scared, and I said, Tess was like, it'd be fine. And I was just, it's so silly. I was terrified because I thought to myself, I know my main worry was, what if something happens to him? Because he obviously looks Muslim, and he was wearing like the white dob, and they knew. So as soon as we went in, luckily we had a guide. So we went 2 times, one with the group. I'll talk about the first visit with the group. And I remember just walking into the mosque, and honestly, it was incredible. And I still really struggled to really explain the feeling I had when I went into the mosque. And I've been to a lot of mosques in my life. I've had the pleasure of going to many, even had the opportunity to go to Mecca, to do Umrah, to do pilgrimage there. But we went to the mosque, and if you see, there's a picture on the right hand side where there's glass windows. Now, these glass windows are broken because, I don't know if many of you remember, but there are times when something will happen in Palestine, and these soldiers will punish the Palestinians by shooting into the mosque, and they will break the glass. And then that's when they raid into the mosque, and then they will harm worshippers and drag them out. And I will never understand that. But Tez managed to pray, and that was quite nice because he got to have that moment. And when we were in the mosque, we were walking around, and the guide even said, he goes, I've had my arm broken twice. And I was like, for what? And because what they do is, if they feel like they don't like you, if they feel like you don't look the right type of person, they want to come in, they'll stop you. And when he was showing us around, we had the opportunity to meet, meet some of the Palestinian people, and I found it quite haunting that it was such a huge mosque, but there were only probably 15 people sitting reading the Quran. And when I managed to speak to one of the ladies, and she said, "Oh, have you come to visit?" And I said, "Oh yeah, we're here from over the UK." And then she was just really happy that we were there. And Tez was talking to some of the men, and they were kind of having a conversation, and they were talking. And I was like, "Why is it so empty?" And the courtyard was just so empty, and it's not meant to be empty. So if you look at the courtyard here, this should be filled with people, and it's not. It's really not. And Owen came, and I remember at one point Owen saying to me that, Shai, I feel like I've robbed someone of being able to come in here so easy. And the reason why he said that is because in Islam, for us Muslims, it's a huge thing to be able to go to the mosque, but many people aren't allowed in the mosque. There are people that are turned away. So, and then obviously I love animals, so as soon as I saw a cat, I was like, I'll just take this cat. But when we managed to go to the mosque, and we managed to, have a tour. I say a tour very lightly. We were given a specific time. But what I found really, really baffling were the soldiers were kind of interrogating people coming in, but Jewish Israeli settlers or visitors, I guess, that are obviously not Muslim, were just allowed in without any sort of like entrance chat or anything. And it just blew my mind because I couldn't understand it. I was like, why are we being interrogated but other people get to come in? So the last time, and I feel quite sad saying it because I hope it's not the last time, that we went to the mosque, it was the day that we left, and Tess said to me, you know what, let's quickly go because we can quickly pop in and see if we can. And luckily I had my passport on me. There was another girl, Sana, she was with us. She had she didn't have her passport. Tez had his passport. We were walking up, and the soldiers stopped us, and they just straight away, they were about to get really like aggressive. And then they go to Tez, they were like, who are you? Why are you here? And I was wearing, while this is going on, there's Americans, by the way, in there. There's Americans kind of walking around taking pictures and everything. And I was kind of by the entrance, and Tez was like, oh, we're leaving today. We just want to come and we just want to pop in. Soldier was like, nope, not allowed, not allowed. And he was like, we want to see you. Then we were like, well, I think he realized we were British or something. He was like, where's your passport? Showed my passport, Tez showed his. And they just were just not accommodating at all. And then what was so surreal is they called someone inside and they said, you have to recite an Islamic verse of the Quran to prove that you are worthy of going inside to the mosque. And I could not believe it, because they were obviously non-Muslims, were having a walk around in the mosque, but they're asking us to prove that we're Muslims to be able to go into a place of worship, which is, and then we went in, and then Tez was praying. Me and Sana went, we were walking around the courtyard. We thought, you know what, let me take a picture. And I said to Sana, I hope and pray that we get a chance to come back here. And there were soldiers there, and they were just so intimidating. And they do this thing where they stare at you, and they stare at you with the guns, and they're holding it, and it's as if they're trying to provoke you to start an argument or to do something so they can push you back out. And I will never understand it, but I was just so glad that we were just able to make this journey and be able to be at this mosque, which I don't know if we're ever going to be able to go back. And I was saying to Tez that I'm just so glad that we had the opportunity to do this. And then when we left, there was a Palestinian guy that was trying to get in the mosque, and they didn't let him in, and they were pushing and shoving him to get off the gate. And I just could not stop crying, because there was a man that came out, an elderly man, and he was kind of just, you could tell it was an elderly local that had been able to go into the mosque. He was coming out, and the floor was wet, and he was kind of struggling, and the guards were like, get out, go the other gate, go the other gate. And they were being so rough with him. And I was just like, you can't even intervene. You can't intervene and say, why are you doing this? Because then they'll start on you. And Tez just was like, should I just leave it? We'll be fine. And the one big takeaway I think that I took away from this experience of the mosque, and not just the fact that I'm so grateful for Sabeel, for you, Claire, for being able to give us this opportunity, because I don't know if me and Tez were to do this by ourselves, would we have the opportunity to do this? Because we have had so many stories from people saying, we actually flew to Jordan, got through the border, and then they didn't let us into the mosque. And it's like, and I don't know how it would be if me and him went by ourselves and that happened. But when we left the mosque, there was a market stall, and I am a bit of a crier, so there was a bit of a crying going on. And it was really early in the morning, and I said to Tez, let's just grab a few like prayer beads or anything. And I think the stall owner, the stall man, was looking, and I think he was trying to suss out where we were from and kind of making sure that I guess we were safe. Palestinian man. And I just brought like a few things, brought some mugs and scarves and things like that. And then he said, hold on. He said, just hold on 1 second. And he went to the back, and then so I'd paid for everything. I paid for it, and he went to the back, and he brought back 3 small Qurans and these little prayer beads in the shape of Palestine colors. And he said, please don't show this to anyone, and hide it and keep it. And I just thought to myself, like, how can these people live like this, that they have to hide a simple prayer bead in Palestinian colors and the Quran, which they're not allowed to sell, even though they're next to a mosque? Because surely you would be selling Islamic books, scriptures and stuff, and you're not allowed to do that. And another thing, actually, I forgot to mention, that when you go into it, they look into your bag, the soldiers, and they say, you haven't got anything Palestine, live in Palestine. And I was thinking, oh shit, because I'm pretty sure I had 3 Palestine like necklaces and stuff in my bag, but they were under it. But luckily he didn't he kind of looked, but I had quite things on top. So that's all I can say really. And actually, when people say to me that we should boycott going to Palestine because we're putting money in the Israelis' pockets, or we need to stop, that's not true. We have to keep going, we have to keep visiting. And these people, the market stall owner, the people in the mosque, they want us, they need us to be present, to be there, and to show that we are with them, whether you're Muslim or not. It doesn't matter. For the sake of humanity, we need to be there, we need to show them, and that gives them strength. And I don't want to say they're resilient because I've been thinking about that word resilience for a while now. And I just think they're just incredible humans because I couldn't live like that. I genuinely couldn't. So if you have the chance, please go and visit the mosque and please go to the market stalls, guys, and just buy because they've got a livelihood and yeah, so thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Shai. That was lovely. I'd like to invite Emma now, who's going to be speaking about her our visit to Masafer Yatta. Thank you, Emma. And Emma, I've not seen you yet. I'm hoping you're here.
Hello, I'm here. Um, Thank you, everybody. I'm just figuring out how to share my screen. I hope that
Yes, we can see it.
you can see it and just get into slideshow mode. Okay. Um, yeah, so we went to Masafayata a little later into, we're skipping forward a few days here in our trip. And this was, I think, pretty much our first trip out into the West Bank proper and like going out of Jerusalem along the roads, trying to understand where we were. So we're in Masafayata, which is in the South Hebron Hills, in the south of the West Bank, and it's an absolute hotspot of violence. And we visited the house of Basel Adra, who is in the blue t-shirt you can see on the screen. He directed No Other Land, an incredibly powerful documentary, and he spent an hour sharing his story and the story of his village and neighboring villages with us. So I'm just going to talk a little bit. I've got slightly fewer photos to share, but a little bit of history, a little bit of context about what we learned. Mainly just story after story of brutal, physical, personal violence. We'd spent like several days unpacking the ways in which the violence against Palestinians is kind of insidious, and it comes in like raids, and it comes in soldiers in Jerusalem and patrols and roads. And here we were faced with stories of just actual blatant violence against like everybody and anybody, including like vulnerable people, a like grandfather and grandmother in their 80s who were attacked. Many of us had heard about Auda Hathalin's murder earlier in the summer, and Basil told us stories of how that had not been a one-off event, of how since then the violence has only escalated as Auda's family and community were punished for their resistance and for protesting the way in which the Israeli military treated them. And so yeah, they share all of this on social media. They're doing such an incredible job to keep getting their message out there. So Basa Adra's account is one that you can follow. Supportmasafayata.com is the website of No Other Land and has loads of information, resources, signposting to understand more. Because yeah, Basil's putting like their photography skills, their skills in sharing stories. So there's just like so much for us to learn and to see. And yeah, the story here on the right is from just like a few days after we were there, where Basil himself was attacked along with his brother, and which is just horrifying to meet someone and then know that that was happening to them. And I think we might have even like still been in Palestine at the time. So yeah, we learned about a huge amount of physical brutality in these last few months, but I wanted to then, when I came home, do a bit more research about, the context of all of this violence. And so this is a short timeline. Don't have long, so it's very brief. But this violence is part of a big picture that obviously has been ongoing for decades. The West Bank was occupied in 1967, and 1980 was the crucial year for this region because it was declared a closed military training zone. Despite the fact this is privately owned Palestinian land, it's lived on by many communities, it's people's home, suddenly it's allegedly this closed zone that no one's allowed to be in, let alone live in. And so that this is all part of a systemic attempt to erase life in this region. The residents, Palestinians, have been fighting this in the courts, on the ground, but in 2022 their petitions were dismissed, which essentially gave the green light to the military to go ahead and expel people. And so from that then on, this threat of like imminent expulsion has been hanging over these people's heads, and they never know at what point it's going to happen. Demolition orders are constantly occurring because the Israeli authorities refuse to provide permits for Palestinians to build. Like 98% of applications for permits are refused, and then they are punished for building infrastructure that they need. And it's not just homes, it's community centres, it's infrastructure, it's farming buildings, and everything that sustains life in this very rural subsistence living region. And so, yeah, particularly in the last literally just the last few months, the acceleration of violence has been horrific, with a couple of particular stories. You might want to screenshot and read these articles or look them up later. They just really highlight a couple of just, two examples, just a drop in the ocean of the ways in which families who have fought and clung on to their land and their homes for decades are now finding that they expect to be expelled at any time, that they've almost feel it's inevitable now. I took this picture as we left Basil's house because I was just so struck, with that graffiti, with that "Will you sit and watch?" And then I read later in this first article that that's a guest house. It's a hub of community organizing, of resistance, and of hosting international activists, which is now at imminent risk of demolition. And in fact, the family basically understand from the lawyers that the legal system is just totally infiltrated by settlers. They feel they have no chance to fight this anymore, which is devastating news. But the communities are so organized, as I was saying, that spirit of community has not gone away, and that's just so evident in all of the actions that people are taking to fight every single house demolition. But these orders are coming, more and more frequently, and this is just an absolutely critical moment for this region. But on a more positive note, I was just so struck by the beautiful artwork in Basil's house. These are just a few of the murals. And it just, to me, showcases that spirit of life and of joy and of commitment to their land and to one another. And I just wanted to end with those pictures. Thank you.
Emma, thank you so much for articulating all that information so well. Emma, you didn't introduce yourself at the start. Will you just tell us all who you are?
Sure. I'm Emma. I'm based in Cambridge. I'm a community worker in my local area, and that's mainly it. Yeah, an organizer. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was really good. Tez, can I invite you to come and speak next and share about our time in Hebron?
Yes, you can, Claire. Yes, you can. Hi, everyone. My name is Tez. I'm a stand-up comedian, sometimes better known as Shai's husband. Thank you to Claire for the approach earlier in the year and the invitation to come on this trip. It was incredible. It was eye-opening. It was heartwarming. It was frustrating. It was horrible at times, but it was really, really important and really informed sort of what I want to do in the future in my own art. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about Hebron. So let me share my screen again and let's do that. Okay, so Hebron is a city in the West Bank. It is the largest city. Can I not be heckled by my own wife, please? It's the largest city in the West Bank. Thank you. It is the largest city in the West Bank, and So in 1967, when the when the war happened, Hebron was occupied by the Israelis, and that is really when the sort of escalation in apartheid began. It's also when it started being occupied by settlers, and then in 1997, after the Hebron Protocol, a portion of the city was officially designated over to Israel. So the city is split into two zones, H1, which is about 80% Palestinian, and H2, which is 20% Israeli. But when I say H1 is 80% Palestinian, they have control within the city, legislative and civil control. But outside of that, in terms of what goes in, what goes out, roads leading in, roads leading out, all of that is controlled by Israel, as is large parts of the West Bank, actually. So H2 was designated during the Hebron Protocol in 1997 as a given over to settlers, and 40,000 Palestinian Arabs were displaced, removed from their homes to make way for 400 settlers who were protected by 4,000 security staff. So 40,000 people were displaced to make way for 400 settlers. When you walk around, you can see that the area H2, which is 40,000 Palestinians still live in H2, by the way, even though it is occupied by 400 settlers. But the entire area has been transformed. The geography of the area has completely changed to make way and to prioritize those 400 settlers. So Palestinians who live there have to go through these demeaning checkpoints to get from one part of the city to the other. Often they are unable to get back to their own homes easily. They have to a direct path might take them 10 minutes, but sometimes they have to go an hour all the way around because the Israeli guards might decide on a whim to close the checkpoint, and so you cannot get easy access to your house. You can see the sort of there's cages, there's flags, and 400 settlers is not a lot of people. That's like what, 40, 50 families, but they have completely taken over the area, and the military make sure that it is them who are on top in this area. We were privileged enough to this is the famous King David Street that leads to the patriarch, the cave of the patriarchs at the bottom of the street, and these shops were all Palestinian shops before they were all closed down by the Israelis and the settlers. And you can see those cages on top. Those are Palestinians living in those homes, and those cages are for their protection, so that they're not so that they don't get so that the Israelis can't attack them. So there are Palestinian families living above those shops, and those shops were in their family for years, decades sometimes. But those shops are now completely closed because the Israelis won't allow them to open. We managed. We were lucky enough to meet Issa Amro. So you'll recognize Issa Amro from the Louis Theroux documentary. He's the one who gave Louis Theroux the tour of Hebron, and a lot of what I'm talking about is explained in that documentary. And we went to his house, and the window on the left is an image taken from Issa Amro's house, and they have had to put a metal cage outside of their window because Israeli settlers would come into their house and break their windows. And so we were able to have we were treated to a really nice lunch by Issa Amro and his family, and I'll just let Issa Amro say a few words.
If I need an ambulance here, I die without Palestinian ambulance coming to Hebron, to H2, to an area under the Israeli military control. They should give me first aid and medication. But they are not the only, as they say, only democracy in the Middle East. They are the only occupation, the only apartheid, the only genocide, the only country with its prime minister is wanted to the International Criminal Court. The current Israeli prime minister is wanted as a war criminal.
So to give you a taste of what life is like for Issa Amro and his family and the other Palestinians who are remaining in that area, life is very, very difficult for them. The apartheid system is very, very real. And he touched upon, like, if he gets ill or something happens to him, an Israeli ambulance who has easy access to the area won't come and treat him. He'll have to wait for a Palestinian ambulance who needs to go through a checkpoint. You need to get permits. And in that time, something really horrible could happen to him, or, his treatment that he needs gets delayed, which could lead to complications. So the apartheid system is it it's so pervasive, and it sort of infiltrates every level of a Palestinian's life, from the day they're born to school, education, work, transport, getting around, logistics, importing, exporting, business. Every single aspect of a Palestinian's life in the West Bank is either controlled by or affected by the occupation.
If I need a
Sorry. So again, like Emma, I wanted to leave it with some images of resistance, because resistance, there are many many forms of it, and I think art is a very underrated and very powerful form of resistance. So Isa Amro, even though all the hardships he's going through, and everything, and sort of just the mental load that the occupation has on him, and sort of even the physical violence that is meted out to him and his family, he still has this sign, this Free Palestine sign in his garden, in his house, which shows the level of strength that these people have, the mental strength to fight and to resist the occupation. And then just on the left as well, there's a stencil of Haram Sharif from Mecca, which is just and the Israeli flag is kind of just to the right of that image. So it just goes to show that the resistance is there, and we need to support them in any way that we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tez. And I think I saw a post today that Issa had shared on his Instagram that today he's not being allowed back into his house, that the Israeli military are not allowing him into his home. So, yeah, all very tough. But thank you for sharing. I'm going to welcome back Alex, please, to speak about our visit to Beit Ijza. Thank you, Alex.
Great, thank you very much. I have the slides working now, and I'll share those. Share. Great. Yeah, just to go back, this is our group, our wonderful people, including Claire and Tez and Aya and Emma, and Shai, you can see there in the back. This is the educational bookshop that I mentioned earlier. You can see Owen and one of the owners, Ahmed. And then on the right side, you can see the other cafe that was raided. That's the Gateway Cafe, and their much smaller collection of books that was also cleared out. Right. So I wanted to talk about Beit Ijza and our visit. It's an amazing, very sad and very troubling example of what has been done in the West Bank to people who have lived there for a very long time, whose ownership of the land far predates the Israeli occupation. Beit Ijza is one of the villages in the West Bank, just northwest of Jerusalem. You can see on the map there, I made a GIF so that you can zoom on exactly where the village is and where the Garib family house is located, surrounded on really all four sides by an Israeli settlement, and then in the very narrow corridor that connects it to the rest of the Palestinian village, it's controlled at times by a gate that's remotely controlled from the Israeli military, from Jerusalem, from the security forces. So it's important to say this is not an isolated case, that the Garib family home is one of hundreds of Palestinian properties that are trapped in these cages, including the so-called seam zones, the areas between Israel's illegal wall and the border. In some places, farmers must apply for an Israeli military permit just to reach their own olive trees. In Beit Ijza, Sadat Garib, he's the man on the far right there. He can access their land only twice a year under surveillance for a few hours, and they have to drive a very circuitous route to get to their own land. He described settlers shooting at their home, harassing the children, and what I thought was the most disturbing example of harassment was settlers like to stand on the balconies overlooking their home, and they like to strip naked in order to humiliate and psychologically terrorize the family, especially the women and the children. It's a new tactic that I'd never imagined people would be capable of. The Grebes once owned nearly 100 dunhams of farmland, a full hillside of olive trees, and now they live on half of 1% of it on 500 square meters, fenced and surveilled on all sides. Um, for years, the gate has determined whether children can go to school, whether bread comes to the home, whether the family is allowed to leave. For Sadat, this recently became brutally clear when his mother was gravely ill. For 3 days, the family pleaded for permission to leave their own home through the gate. They contacted the Red Cross. They phoned the Israeli officials. They begged soldiers at the checkpoint, but no one came. His mother was inside in pain, deteriorating hour by hour, with just a few inches of steel caging her from getting to a hospital. At dawn on the third day, Sadat made the choice to go ahead and break the gate, and there's actually a video of him doing this. It's kind of a triumphant moment when he decides to just say, "Fuck it, I'm going to break the gate." And other people from the village were there as well, helping him go and get his mother and carry her to a hospital. She survived, luckily, but the settlers in the surrounding area responded by threatening him with death threats, and so that if he ever touched the gate again, that they would kill him. So Beit Isra it's a microcosm of the entire occupied population, being caged, controlled, and dispossessed of their own land. Everywhere you go in the West Bank, we saw these orange gates that are controlled by the Israeli military, and then yellow gates that are accessed only by Israeli military and settlers. Palestinians cannot open these gates. Touching them risks death, or even you can be arrested, or you can even be killed. And this is apartheid in daily life. People's movement, healthcare, and safety are determined by their race. Amnesty International calls this a system of prolonged and cruel discriminatory treatment. It's a textbook example of what apartheid is like. And this is not something new. This is something that Palestinians have had to live with for decades. When I visited the West Bank back in 2003, I saw exactly the same thing. I saw Israeli soldiers who not only wanted to control Palestinian movement, they found it hilarious to stop people from getting to the hospital in Nablus from the surrounding villages. They would keep people there in the baking hot sun all day just because they could. And that's really what it comes down to. This occupation is about control, but it's not about security. It's about punishing people for being Palestinian, and that's disgusting and illegal. Over to you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Alex, thank you so much. Can you tell us who you are? Because I don't
Yeah,
think you've introduced yourself.
I haven't really known. I'm Alex Smith. I'm a lawyer and a public health specialist. I used to work for the U.S. government for USAID on global health policy and human rights, and now I resigned from the U.S. government because of Gaza policies, and now I use my skills to do everything I can to undermine U.S. policy on Gaza and other areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, Gordon, can I invite you to speak, please, about the Duvan Dance Company? Thank you.
Hello, yeah, my name's Gordon Hewitt. I live in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I work for a community arts organisation. I have my own music spoken word project, Champion Things it's called. And just going to make sure that I can get this. Yeah, right. So yeah, before we went to Palestine, I was hoping that I always wanted to meet artists because partly from living in what is now a post-conflict society, although sometimes it doesn't look like that, the arts plays a role of sort of galvanizing resistance. It can also be very contested, but it also offers a bit of hope for the future. And we use art. We use this particular phrase, which you're going to see in a minute, because before we went, I was hoping to meet the artist. Then the trip was cancelled, and I asked if there was any artist I might be able to talk to. And I think it was Omar Omar Harami, who sent me a bunch of artists, but the one that got back to me was a person called Hannah Tams, and he's a dancer. And I got to interview him before we went. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get to meet him if we're really lucky. And, I'll probably do it in the evening after we've done all the other stuff about the occupation. And when I lifted up the itinerary the first time I saw it, somewhere in the middle of the activities was we were going to meet Hannah and his dance organization, Duban Dance. And I remember we traveled up to there. I think it's in East Jerusalem. We traveled up there. We got a lunch, and then we went inside to the dance studios. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we were presented. Hannah's an expert on folklore, and so he went through quite a very useful and very detailed presentation about the costumes that dancers wear and what they represent and what the embroidery represents. And then he went through that, and then shortly afterwards he did a dance for us. And I was almost in the middle watching him very closely, and I thought it was incredible. And I thought the mixtures of sort of traditional dance with sort of, I suppose you could call them hip hop elements with contemporary dance elements was quite an interesting fusion. And it's something that happens locally. It's something that happens locally. You often see people who have a kind of Irish dance perspective mixing it with various other forms. So I thought that was very interesting. So it was a wonderful part of the trip, and a very, very sort of, I would say, life affirming, in amongst all the sort of very difficult and very problematic elements of and disturbing elements of the occupation. Here was a sort of little ray of sunshine, I suppose, in the middle of that for me. It's based in East Jerusalem. You can see that on the thing. And it's interesting in their website, they have this based inside the walls, but outside the Israeli municipal boundaries of Jerusalem. I don't know why that's necessarily important. I didn't ask at the time, but it is something that they talk about. Oh, well, it looks like this, it does look like that's as far as my computer's going to allow me to go. There's a series of slides. I might see if I can share it. Is it okay if I try and share it again?
That's absolutely fine.
That's all right. No, just for some reason it wouldn't.
We love tech.
Oh, well, look, I'll just move on to the second one. Yeah, I hope people can see that.
Yes, we
There's
can.
there's a little group of the young people. Hannah works with young people, particularly people who have who live in poverty and live in difficulties. He has a whole grouping of young people that he works with. But what I think is most interesting, if you can read these little key elements of the mission of the Duban Dance Company, this is exactly the language they use in Northern Ireland. So enrich Palestinian society through the transformative power of the arts. I use that phrase almost daily here, and it's something that people use all the time, that the arts is vitally important. Now, we are post-conflict, they're in the middle of a conflict, but the transformative power of the arts is important in terms of galvanizing resistance, but also, as I said, offering a little bit of hope for the future. They provide a creative space for incubating artists and people's talents, same kind of thing my organization does, promote for professional dance, use dance to tackle political, economic, and social issues. And the latest work is about women's issues and about women's rights. That's the latest work that they're doing. This is Hannah, and that's a real picture. And I put that on after I interviewed him. I put that as the cover of the monthly. Now, he's got a great story. I hope people can go and read the interview. He's from Jerusalem. He was originally an athlete and came from an athletic family, very athletic family. He was a very good swimmer, talented enough to go to the Olympics, but he wasn't allowed a Palestinian passport. So he was offered a chance to go to the Olympics using an Israeli passport. And he and his family refused to do that. And basically, he gave up swimming after that. But he was always obsessed with dance, and he used to go along to his little sister's ballet lessons. And he just got obsessed with dance, all forms of dance. He started with a Dabka group. He eventually set up Duban Dance as a teenager. He launched it with 16 young women students, and now he's got 50 dedicated dancers, and we were lucky enough to see them dance, which I thought it was a wonderful part of the trip. I think they've got an extremely unique approach. They say it themselves, but I think it's very interesting. They fuse different genres and different styles together, which can be something that can be not necessarily completely understood by, say, even his own family, who are quite concerned about the sort of dance thing, the sort of orientation he had to dance initially. And you can read about that in the interview. But I think they fuse sort of dabka, the sort of traditional dance, with flamenco, ballet, hip hop, all those styles, trying to fuse them all together, which I think is a wonderful sort of sense of pulling other parts of the rest of the world, while at the same time trying to maintain the sense of Palestinian traditions. They provide dance education. They emphasize cultural and social development, and they do have a global reach now. Hannah dances all over the world, and I'm just going to come to something in a minute. Because they have a website, you can go and see their Facebook page, their Instagram, and if you go to the part at the bottom there is the interview. You can go and see it in Community Arts Partnership's website. I think it's a 4 or 5 part interview where he goes through his life and what he's trying to do. But once we came back, I know a woman particularly well, Mags Byrne, who's a serious dance person in Northern Ireland, and she has worked in Palestine, and she'd worked with Hannah. It just happened to be, I didn't know that, but I found out. So we've been meeting for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks, and we are aiming. We know that Hannah's going to be dancing in Paris in March, and he's going to bring some of the young people if he can get the permissions to do it. But if you felt like a trip to Paris in March to see a fantastic dance recital and show, you maybe do that. But if we can make it happen, we're going to have Hannah dance with an up and coming young dancer here, Michael McAvoy, in Belfast in July, August. And I'll make sure everyone knows if we can get him over, that's what we're going to try and do. And we think we'll have a great response to the work that he's doing. And in marrying him with someone who's doing something similar in the arts here, I think would be a very useful sort of combination. So if we can get that to happen, that'll be wonderful. But it was a really, I thought, a wonderful part of the trip. And yes, we got to see all the awful things of the occupation, but we also got to see that part of Palestinian culture, which is resisting in all sorts of ways, but trying to fuse together elements of the whole world in their dance. And I think that augurs well for the future.
Thank you so much, Gordon. And that was inspiring. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Alex back again to speak to us about the Palestinian economy.
It's me again. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share this screen. Great. Okay. Great. So this is going to the next slide. I didn't get a picture of Sam Bahur, but he was a wonderful speaker. This is a sector of an aspect of the occupation that doesn't get talked about enough. We often hear about the physical violence, of course. We hear about the deprivation of land, the theft of land, the theft of water. Obviously, we hear about the genocide in Gaza. But we don't often hear about the theft of livelihoods and the deprivation that Israel is imposing through the Palestinian economy. So Sam Bahur was a businessman, and he's somebody who's chosen to return to the West Bank to try to stimulate the economy as much as he can. But he talked at length about three things: about the efforts of Israel to maintain exploitative labor practices in the West Bank, allowing Palestinian workers to fill only basically the dirty jobs that Israelis don't want to do, such as construction and textile work and light industries, such as making all the plastic bags. Every plastic bag in Israel is made by Palestinian hands in a factory in Hebron. Before October 7th, there were about 200,000 Palestinians going over the wall in one way or another to work in Israel. That was reduced to zero briefly, and now it's back up to about 30,000. But the people are doing, again, the jobs that Israelis don't want to do. He also talked about Israel just straight up stealing customs money from Palestinians, and there's been some good reporting on this from Mondo Weiss and from UNCTAD. I just learned how to pronounce this acronym today about that theft of the customs money. Since October 7th, 2023, it's plunged the PA into an economic crisis by withholding nearly 7 billion shekels, around $2 billion in Palestinians' customs money. Under the Paris Protocol in 1994, Israel collects customs, VAT, and imports taxes on behalf of the Palestinian Authority for goods entering the West Bank and Gaza through Israeli-controlled borders. And these funds are called clearance revenues. UNCTAD, the World Bank, and the IMF confirms that these revenues belong to the Palestinians. Israel's role should only be custodial, and the PA relies on these funds to fund 60 to 70% of its total budget. So it's a huge crippling effect, this theft of their customs funds. Israel also makes unilateral deductions, and this is where it's really just straight up theft. Israel often reduces the transfer by deducting amounts that it claims represent electricity and water bills, medical referrals, payments to Palestinian prisoners to support prisoners in Israeli jails, and municipal fees. And these deductions are not negotiated. They're not legal, obviously. They're not independently audited, and they far exceed what is documented. And then the third thing that Sam talked about was Israel's central bank repeatedly refusing to accept large volumes of Israeli money, shekels, banknotes, from the Palestinian Monetary Authority, which is their version of a central bank. And this creates a manufactured liquidity crisis that cripples the Palestinian economy because Palestinians depend heavily on cash transactions. The Palestinian Monetary Authority accumulates all these shekels, all this cash that it can't recirculate under existing monetary arrangements. Israel is supposed to receive these surplus notes and reintroduce them into the Israeli banking system. There's also a ever looming threat by the finance minister, who, if anybody remembers, is Bezalel Smotrich, who's just a great guy, isn't he? Who is constantly threatening to basically make sure that that Palestinians cannot deal with Israel at all, which would again completely cripple the Palestinian economy. There would be nothing going in, nothing coming out. People wouldn't be able to get fuel to run basic services or factories. So that's an ever looming threat. And that threat is very much tied to Palestinians trying to exercise their human rights under international law. Every time there's a movement or when states recognize Palestinian statehood, Bezalel Smotrich comes out again with this threat to completely destroy their economy. So yeah, I want to wrap up there just by saying that, of course, all of this is completely illegal under the ICJ decision last summer in 2024. This is apart from the genocide case. This is the ICJ decision on a case that started in 2022, where they found that the Israeli occupation is illegal and the way that Israel imposes its occupation is also illegal. Israel has no authority to really have any business at all in the West Bank, to oversee security, to engage in raids, or to collect taxes, or to oversee public finance. So every time Israel imposes itself on the Palestinian economy, that's another illegal act. Importantly, the court also ordered, as well as the orders. I recommend everybody read this decision because it was really phenomenal. That the occupation was illegal, that Palestinians had the right of return. They also said that Israel must pay appropriate reparations to the Palestinian people. Now, the court didn't give a dollar amount, but you can imagine that what is owed from decades and decades of theft of land, of destruction of property, of actively denying economic development, of uprooting farmlands, of the case of Betija that we talked about, where farmlands have not been accessed by the people who should own them. The total amount that Israel is going to owe Palestinians whenever that justice is delivered is, I think, going to be, the gross national product of Israel many, many times over, such that if it were enforced, um, every man and woman in Israel would be working off the debt for the next 20 or 30 years at least. But that's for the court to decide at a future date. Um, and then finally, I did want to also mention Sam talked about Israel bonds, the central bank bonds, which are often bought by other countries and U.S. states. There's a movement that I'm working on right now to try to get U.S. states to stop trading or investing in Israel bonds. Not only because it's an immoral thing to do to invest in a country that's currently practicing apartheid and genocide, but also because they're just bad investments, because Israel's um, financial credit has been downgraded several times, and that they are paying for old bonds with new bonds, and that these are basically junk bonds that are very risky. One of the proponents of doing this is Zoran Mandami, who is the name that everybody knows as New York City mayor. He wants to stop New York City from investing in Israel bonds. When he was an assemblyman, he was also introducing a bill to try to stop New York State from investing in Israel bonds. So that's something that we'll continue to work on over the next weeks and months and years. Back over to you.
Thank you. That was so insightful and something that often we don't have an awareness over. So thank you so much, Alex. Diogo, please can I welcome you to come and speak to us about our meeting with Mustafa Barghouti. Thank you. And please
Yes.
introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Diogo. I'm filmmaker and photographer from Portugal, and I'm based in Sarajevo and in Lisbon. Okay, I will just share quickly. So, yeah, as Claire said, I will talk a little bit about Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. So, when the war started in 1967, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti was in the scouts, and they were called to help with the injured people, and they got some training, the scouts, and then uh, they went to help the people. And for the first time, he witnessed bombings and airstrikes and shootings, people bleeding and dead people. And at that time, with almost 13 years old, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti realized that the Palestinian needed to have self uh, organization and self reliance, and he because at that time the belief that help would come from outside was kind of shattered, and this had a big impact on him. And later on he became involved in a very important organization, which he was one of the co-founders, called Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which also he helped to create a whole program um, that trained in the last 10 years about 82,000 young people with the first aid, so that they would know exactly what to do in case if somebody needed first aid help. Um, and after Dr. Mustafa Barghouti graduated, he went to work on Makased Hospital in Jerusalem, and there he realized something was wrong. The patients would come and they get treated, but then after 2 or 3 months, they would come back with the same disease. And this is where he realized very quickly that most communities in Palestine had no primary health care whatsoever, and no medical centers, health centers, no clinics, and that's why there was no follow-up on the patients to prevent diseases. And this had to do with the Israeli occupation being in charge of the healthcare. They were collecting Palestinian taxes, but not spending much money on Palestinians. So the problem is endless, because before Palestinians managed to build their own health system independently from the Israeli occupation, the situation was terrible. And I will show a video where Dr. Barghouti will explain it further. And because Israel is systematically trying to cripple the Palestinian society and denying them self-determination, one of their tactics is to destroy the Palestinian healthcare system. And we all know that healthcare is one of the most important pillars of any society. So even after Palestinians manage to build their own health system, the Israeli occupation keeps constantly dismantling and destroying. Whatever Palestinians build, the Israelis go and try to destroy it. And this has a pattern that has gone for decades and decades. For example, in 2018, Palestine had the highest rate of attacks on healthcare worldwide. And we all know that 2023 was the same, 2024 was the same. And the new annual report for 2015 obviously didn't came out yet, but it will probably again be Palestine. This is some of their services of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which is Palestinian. It's only a Palestinian organization. And now I will show a video of Dr. Mustafa Barghouti that I filmed when we were in Ramallah. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay.
Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which was founded 45 years ago. We founded it as young medical personnel, doctors, nurses, health professionals, to deal with the situation where Palestinian healthcare under occupation was in a horrible situation, and to concentrate on supplying support to underprivileged, to the poor population, but mostly to the areas that were deprived completely from healthcare. And medical relief now works in West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. We are a national organization. The people who last year who benefited from our work is between 2.8 to 3 million people. And that's mainly because of the enhancement of our emergency activities in Gaza. We have now in Gaza 80 medical teams, all from Gaza, doctors, nurses, health professionals, who treat approximately 200,000 people every month. And of course, with all the complexities that we've been subjected to, like destruction of our clinics, destruction of our centers, renovating them and then getting them destroyed again, etc., etc. And our teams are doing really heroic work. Some of our teams were unfortunately, or volunteers killed or injured. Some lost their families, but they struggle every day to help the people who need their help. And Medical Relief now is the main organization that takes care of cancer patients. We are also in charge of blood supplies to hospitals, checking them, but most importantly, treating people from different diseases. And also we have mobile teams that go to treat injured people. In the West Bank, we work around the clock also, but one of the most important activities in the last 10 years is that we have about 17 mobile teams which go around to areas that are subjected to Israeli harassment, especially settlers, terrorist attacks. So we now have 17 teams serving about 182 communities. And in addition to that, we have major centers that provide care to people. Our health system now is being harmed by 1,000 military checkpoints now in the West Bank by confiscating so much of our resources. Before we managed to build our own independent health system, the situation was horrifying. We had an infant mortality rate in most of the areas of 150 per thousand, which means 15% of the children would die before reaching the age of 1 year. At that time, Israel was spending $600 per capita on health for Israelis and only $18 per capita for Palestinians. We had horrible situation, bad hospitals, no equipment. Most of the villages and communities did not have any health centers. That's when we started building our own independent health system. And maybe one of the biggest achievements we had was we brought down the infant mortality rate from 150 per thousand to almost 10 now.
So, yeah, I will leave a link in the chat of the PMRS in case if anybody wants to know more of their work or to see what they are doing. Yeah, Claire.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Diogo. Our aim tonight was to really amplify the voices of the Palestinians we met, and I just want to thank you all so much for doing that so well, for spending time, really planning what you were going to say and sharing and uplifting those voices. We also have Alexi with us. I don't know, Alexi, if you just want to share anything from your perspective. You were on the trip with us as well, if you want a few moments.
Yeah, sure. I'm so happy to see all my friends who came. We went to Palestine together. My name's Alexi. I'm a musician. I'm Greek, Scottish, living in Scotland. I didn't prepare a segment because I just thought that I would listen today and sort of round up maybe, or if there were any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions. But one of the things that I hope for all of you listening that comes across, um, and I'm working on actually writing a piece about our trip. And it's been very difficult to find the right sort of voice, I suppose, because obviously going in as people coming from outside Palestine and going into a place that's occupied and has been occupied for, nearly a century now, it's very difficult as sort of Westerners just living in the West to go in and come out and know how to really talk about our experience without sort of feeling like we're centering ourselves. And yet, it is very legitimate that you will go to Palestine and you will feel things about being there as a human being and seeing your human siblings being oppressed in the way that Palestinians are oppressed in Palestine. And I'm not just talking about the occupied West Bank, I'm talking about the whole of Palestine. Um, One of the things that really strikes me, and maybe it's come across as a thread, is that, and this is why I would urge, I don't know how many of you are actually thinking of going on a delegation. I would urge everyone to go because Sabeel does an incredible job, and Omar, who is not with us tonight, is one of the most incredible sort of human beings, but also a brilliant, brilliant guide and an amazing teacher. And what you understand when you go there, which from a distance we can certainly understand, academically, we've even seen, we talk to Palestinians from afar, but when you go there, the sort of the experience of being surrounded by the settlers, by the occupation itself, by the infrastructure, as you go around the West Bank, you really get an understanding that what looks chaotic, I mean, from the moment you arrive, a lot of people don't even realize that Palestine doesn't have control of its borders. We talk about Gaza being under siege. The whole of Palestine is under siege. The border between Jordan and the West Bank is not controlled by Palestine. It's controlled by the occupation. So what you realize as you spend time there is that what seems like chaos is actually it is so it's like it's so methodical and systematic and scientific. That's what's so terrifying about witnessing just sort of the bureaucracy, the fact that they color code gates, red gates for soldiers, orange gates for settlers, the fact that they fragment the entire, the way that they fragment the land, the way that they do it slowly enough that it's a slow process of suffocation. So this idea of sort of how methodical and systematic the process of, I would call it genocide, because the truth is that there is an argument to be made that the colonial project itself, is genocidal in nature. We talk about Gaza as a genocide. Gaza is a Holocaust. It's an acceleration of the genocide. The genocide has actually been ongoing for decades. And and it becomes very clear when you're there in the West Bank. You see the way that the soldiers arrest young boys at a critical age when when they really rely on the bond with their father to break the bonds with their fathers, to break the bonds with their own villages, so that when they get released, obviously they're treated with slight suspicion, because once you've been in the Israeli prison system, you've been compromised. So this constant attempt to fragment people, to make life, do business, they can't, it's just that really you can understand when you come up against it. So I would urge all of you um, to go if you can. It's sort of it's something that will also give authority. But one of the criticisms that certainly I get, and I'm sure many of you do as advocates for Palestinian liberation, one of the arguments you get often from sort of the Zionist talking point is that, well, have you ever been there? And to be able to say, yes, I have been there and I've seen it and I've experienced it, and I've sat with Palestinians and they've told me their stories, and every Palestinian I've met has lost family members, has been shot, has been incarcerated. I mean, that really it gives you it gives you a level of authority that I think if you are planning on being an advocate, empowering. So Sabeel does an amazing job. So I want to just reiterate my thanks to Claire, obviously, for taking us, and Omar and Sabeel, and all my friends here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexi. It's great to hear from you. We also had Denise Goff on the trip with us. And I have recorded an interview with her, and I gave each delegate 5 minutes to speak. And we recorded our interview, and it was 17 minutes, and we don't have time for me to share it now, but I am going to upload it onto YouTube after tonight. So please do go and look at our Sabeel-Kairos YouTube page and watch that video when you have the chance, of my chat with her. Does anybody have any questions before we end our meeting tonight? We're really out of time, but if anyone has anything burning they want to ask of any of the delegates, please do that now. If you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask your question. Otherwise, we'll close the meeting at this point, and I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who contributed. Any questions? Guys, you just did such an amazing job. No one needs to ask any questions.
There's some questions in the chat, Claire.
Oh, are there? Thank you, Aya. Okay. Can you see them? Have you read them? And do you want to read them out? Did you have any difficulties at the border? I went in May 2024 and was wondering if I might have a tougher time now. Anybody like to answer that one for us?
Can I just answer part of that? I just have to say that I genuinely thought that I would have a lot of heat because I was the only Arab in the group with a Lebanese passport, and they absolutely despise us. Even though I had a British passport but I had Lebanese stamps, they didn't even ask me any questions. But they did pull up Owen and Tez. So I think it's just like the luck of I don't know. I just think it's basically the luck of the draw on the day. But I do know for a fact that they're desperate for tourists, and they're just kind of letting in people much easier now than they were. So I don't know. But that's just my experience. I genuinely thought they would turn me away, but they didn't.
We did the land crossing through Jordan, didn't we? Which I think maybe can be slightly easier to get in, although not always. I can't see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone has one and I've missed it, please feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask it. Okay. Now, I don't normally do anything at the end when I speak, but something that was read at our Christmas service a few weeks ago really impacted me. Oh, Lynn, you've got your hand up. Let's hear from you first.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to ask Alexander, that was it, about when you said Israelis took a big part of the money that was to go to the Palestinians from abroad, and I take it that was part of the Oslo Accords agreement, possibly.
Mhm.
And I just wonder, I mean, it sounds naive, but I'm thinking, why don't other countries go direct to the Palestinians, particularly
Mm.
now they've recognized them as a
Yeah.
state now?
Yeah, recognizing is one thing, but the illegal occupation continues, as Alexei mentioned. The borders are all completely controlled by Israel. Part of the Oslo Accords, which Mustafa Barghouti calls a trap. I think most Palestinians are agreed on that it was just a terrible decision that was meant to give Palestinians some autonomy and some control over their own infrastructure and economy. That it was all fake. It was just another tool of control. So what Israel is supposed to do is just be a custodian of that import of that money coming in, the customs money, which is a huge part of the Palestinian budget, about 60 to 70%. But they just decide to keep it for as long as they feel like keeping it. And that's obviously
Yeah,
illegal, but so is the whole occupation, you know.
yeah. I know so I'm taking it there's no political will from the outside countries to deal with the Palestinians directly.
I think anything that's not on the radar, that's not getting public outrage, is not gonna
They're
not
not
gonna
going to happen, not going to
yeah,
change. No,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, there's just one more comment. Let me just check it's not a question. Okay. I'm going to finish things up now. The reason why we do these online events is because we want to amplify the voices of Palestinians who we've met. We want their voices to reverberate, and we also want people who are on these calls and on these events to also be using our voices as well, as much as we can until there is a free Palestine. So I'm just going to read something that really impacted me the other day, and then we'll close. Massive thanks to all you guys. So gorgeous to see you all again. Thank you for the time and effort you put in. So grateful to you. Okay, I just want to read this. The world now is too dangerous and too beautiful for anything but love. May your eyes be so blessed you see God in everyone. Your ears so you hear the cry of the poor. May your hands be so blessed that everything you touch is a sacrament. Your lips so you speak nothing but the truth with love. May your feet be so blessed you run to those who need you. And may your hearts be so opened, so set on fire that your love changes everything. And I just want to close there. Thank you to everyone tonight who has joined us. And I'm going to put the link to donate in the chat.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Hey,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.